Far out in the Viridian Belt, where the stars blinked slow and cold, there floated a small human colony called Xenos 9. To passing ships, it looked like any other farming outpost. Rows of golden grain stretching across rolling hills, solar collectors gleaming under twin suns, and quiet domes where families lived simple lives. Trade logs listed it as AgriZone Delta 7, a low-priority food supplier for the Outer Rim. Nothing special, nothing worth fighting over. But beneath that calm surface, something else lived. Claire stood at the edge of her field at dawn, bare feet sinking slightly into the damp soil. Her skin held the pale green tint of old forests, and her eyes, silver with flecks of gold, watched the sky more than the crops. She wore a plain tunic, stitched from plant fiber cloth, and her dark hair was tied back with a vine that still bloomed tiny white flowers. She did not look like a soldier. She did not look like a leader. To most, she was just another settler, quiet and strange, who kept to herself and never came to town meetings. But the land knew her name. Behind her, nestled in the shade of a curved hydroponic silo, lay Kale. He was no bigger than a ground vehicle, his body coiled in sleep, scales shimmering like cooled metal under morning light. Most would call him a dragon, though he bore little resemblance to the fire-breathing beasts of old myths. His wings folded neatly against his back, thin as solar film, and his breath came slow and steady, mist curling from his nostrils like vapor from a warm spring. A pet, the neighbors said, an odd hobby, maybe genetically modified for pest control. They did not know he was listening. Claire bent down and touched the soil. It pulsed faintly beneath her fingertips, not with machinery but with life deeper than roots. Xenos 9 was not just farmland. It was a cradle. Every seed planted here was chosen not just for nutrition, but for strength, for memory, for defense. The wheat fields hummed with bioresonant patterns. The irrigation lines carried not just water, but coded nutrients that could awaken dormant traits in the soil. And the children who played among the rows. They sang songs passed down from mothers and grandmothers, melodies that tuned the land like instruments. Claire had come here 10 years ago, fleeing something no one spoke of. She arrived alone with only a small satchel and a single egg wrapped in moss. She asked for nothing but a plot of unused land near the eastern ridge. The Colony Council granted it without question. Humans were kind that way, especially to those who kept quiet and worked hard. Over time, she built a home of stone and reclaimed metal. She planted crops that grew faster than normal. She never used chemical sprays. Instead, she walked her fields at night, whispering to the plants, and they listened. Kale hatched during a solar storm. The sky had turned violet, and the colony's power grid flickered for hours. When the egg cracked open, the hatchling did not cry. He opened his eyes, deep amber like molten glass, and looked straight at Claire as if he had known her forever. She fed him sunlight-steeped nectar and crushed meteorite dust. He grew fast, but never large. Not yet. Now as the morning warmed, Claire heard the buzz of an approaching drone. It was a standard survey flyer from the central hub, checking crop yields. She did not look up. She knew how to make the fields appear ordinary, how to slow the growth cycles on command, how to mute the glow in the leaves. The humans here played their part well. They reported average harvests, average weather, average everything. No anomalies, no questions. The drone hovered, scanned, and moved on. But something else was coming. High above Xenos 9, in the silent black between stars, space tore open. Not with a bang, but with a shudder, a ripple in reality that bent starlight like a lens. From that rift emerged a war fleet, massive jagged ships armored in bone-like plating, their hulls etched with ancient war glyphs. The Cathari, they were hunters, conquerors. They believed the galaxy belonged to the strong, and strength was measured in fire and fear. For months they had swept through the Outer Rim, taking colonies with little resistance. Most surrendered quickly. Some fought and were erased. None held secrets worth hiding. They had heard rumors, though, whispers of a quiet world where sensors acted strange, where scout probes went dark. They assumed it was a glitch, or a trap set by a rival empire. They never imagined it was just a farm. Their lead dreadnought, the Fang of Vorthak, dropped into high orbit. Without warning, it broadcast a message across all civilian frequencies. This world is now under Cathari dominion. Surrender your resources, your technology, and your people. Resistance will be met with total annihilation. The message repeated, cold and sharp. In the colony hub, alarms blared. People ran to shelters, some wept, others stood frozen, staring at the sky through transparent domes. But in the eastern fields, Claire did not move. She closed her eyes and placed both hands flat on the ground. Deep below, something stirred. Cale lifted his head. His eyes narrowed. A low hum vibrated in his chest, not a growl, but a resonance like a tuning fork struck in deep space. He stood stretching his wings once, then twice. The air around him shimmered as if heat rose from his scales even in the cool morning. Claire turned to him. "They don't know what grows here," she said softly. Cale blinked slowly. Then he walked to her side, his claws clicking gently on the stone path. He was calm. Ready. Back in the colony, the administrator tried to send a reply, pleading, bargaining, offering food stores. But the Cathari did not respond. Instead, they launched dropships. 3 of them, black and angular, slicing through the upper atmosphere like knives. Claire watched them descend. She did not run. She did not hide. She walked toward the center of her largest field, where a single silver sapling stood, no taller than her waist, its leaves edged with light. She knelt and pressed her forehead to its trunk. "It is time," she whispered. The sapling glowed softly. Then the glow spread, through the roots, through the soil, through every plant in every field. The wheat straightened. The vines tightened. The flowers closed their petals and turned toward the sky. In town, a child stopped crying. An old man paused at his window. A woman tending hydroponic lettuce felt her hands grow warm. They did not understand why, but they all looked east, because something was waking up. The first dropship landed 2 kilometers from the colony perimeter. Ramps slammed down. Armored Cathari warriors marched out, weapons humming with charged plasma. They expected empty fields. Scared farmers. Easy capture. Instead, the ground beneath their feet felt alive. One warrior stepped forward, scanning with his bioradar. The readout flickered, showing plant life, yes, but also complex neural networks threading through the soil. "Impossible," he muttered. Then the cornfield moved, not in the wind, not by accident. Rows of stalks bent toward the invaders, not away. Leaves unfolded like hands, and from the soil, thin tendrils rose. Slow at first, then fast, wrapping around boot heels, climbing legs, seeking warmth. The Cathari fired. The plasma bolts scorched the air, but the plants did not burn. They absorbed the heat, turned it into light, and grew brighter. Panic spread. Back at her field, Claire stood. Cale stood beside her, wings half spread, eyes fixed on the horizon. She reached up and touched his neck. "They came for food," she said, "but they will find roots." In the distance, the second dropship began its descent, but this time the clouds above it thickened unnaturally. Not with storm, but with pollen, thick, golden, glowing. It drifted down like snow, settling on the ship's hull. The metal began to change color, to soften, to bloom. The Cathari had made a mistake. They saw a farm and thought it weak. But on Xenos 9, even the dirt had teeth. And the woman in the fields, she was not a farmer. She was the keeper. And her dragon was not a pet. He was the first spark of what came next. As the sun reached its peak, Claire turned and walked back toward her home. The Cathari would come. They would fight. They would learn. And when they did, the galaxy would finally understand. Humans did not just survive. They grew. The Cathari dropships landed in a triangle around the colony's outer edge, their black hulls steaming from atmospheric entry. Warriors poured out, armored in chitin-plated suits, their eyes scanning the horizon with cold precision. They expected resistance, maybe a few armed farmers, some automated turrets. What they found was silence. No gunfire, no alarms, just whine through tall grass and the soft hum of solar collectors. Their commander, a scarred veteran named Vrelk, stepped forward. His voice crackled over the squad comms. "Secure the agri-hubs. Disable power nodes. Capture live specimens for biotesting." He did not believe in mercy. To him, humans were soft creatures, useful only as labor or data. But as his soldiers moved toward the nearest field, the ground shifted, not with tremors, not with traps, with intent. Vines coiled around their boots, not thick enough to trip, but enough to slow. Stalks of wheat turned their heads, tracking movement like eyes. The air grew thick with the scent of blooming nightshade, sweet but sharp. One soldier coughed. Another rubbed his eyes. Their scanners glitched, showing impossible readings. Plant density too high, thermal signatures too warm, bioelectric fields where none should be. It is just plants. Vrelk growled. Burn a path. Plasma torches flared to life. Beams of orange fire cut through rows of corn, charring stalks to ash. For a moment it seemed to work. The path cleared. The soldiers advanced. Then the ashes moved. From blackened soil, green shoots erupted. Fast. Faster than should be possible. Within seconds, new plants rose, taller, stronger, their leaves edged with metallic sheen. They did not burn. They absorbed. The plasma heat fed them. Vrelk froze. This was not nature. This was design. Meanwhile, in the heart of the colony, humans gathered, not in panic, but in quiet order. Elders handed out woven satchels. Children tied vines around their wrists. Women and men stood at the edge of town, barefoot, eyes closed, breathing slowly. They did not carry guns. They carried seeds. Among them, Claire walked. She wore no armor, no weapon, only a belt of dried pods and a cloak made of living moss that shifted color with her mood. Behind her, Kale moved like shadow-given form, his claws silent on the stone road. His scales now held a faint inner glow, amber light pulsing with each breath. They do not understand, she said to no one in particular. They think life is something to take, not something to join. At the colony's central square, an old woman named Mara stood waiting. She held a wooden staff tipped with a glowing root. "The deep root is awake," she said. Her voice was thin but steady. Claire nodded. "Then we show them what grows when you cut too deep." Outside, the Cathari pushed forward. They reached the first storage silo, a massive dome of reinforced ceramic. Inside should have been grain. Instead, when they breached the door, they found darkness and movement. Tendrils lashed out not to kill but to bind. Thick, fibrous ropes wrapped around limbs, pulling soldiers into the silo. The door sealed behind them. From within came muffled shouts, then silence. The silo's outer surface pulsed once like a heartbeat. Vrelk roared in fury. "Deploy sonic emitters. Level the structures." Machines rolled forward, humming with destructive frequency. They were meant to shatter bone, rupture organs. But as the first wave hit the colony's edge, the plants responded. Flowers opened wide, their petals acting as dampeners. Trees bent their branches into arcs, absorbing vibrations. Even the soil compacted, forming layers that scattered sound like pebbles in water. The sonic blast fizzled out before it reached the homes. Vrelk stared, his certainty cracked. Back in the fields, Claire knelt again. This time she pressed her palms into the earth and sang. Not loud, not dramatic, just a low, steady hum that matched the planet's own rhythm. The ground answered. Roots surged upward, not as weapons, but as guardians. They formed walls between the Cathari and the town, living barriers tough as steel but warm to the touch. And through gaps in the green, human faces appeared, not armed, not angry. Just watching. Among them were children, the youngest no older than 5. They held small sprigs in their hands, their eyes calm. One boy stepped forward. He placed his sprig on the ground. It took root instantly, growing into a thorned vine that coiled around a fallen plasma rifle, rendering it useless. Vrelk's comms crackled. "Commander, we're losing contact with Squad 3. Their vitals are stable, but they're not responding. Scanners show they're surrounded by organic tissue. It's feeding them oxygen. Clean water. They're alive but trapped in a cocoon of leaves. Impossible," Vrelk snarled. "Humans do not have this tech." But it was not tech, it was biology. Harmony. A language older than war. High above, in orbit, the Cathari dreadnought shifted position. Its weapons powered up. If ground forces failed, they would scour the surface from space, reduce the colony to glass, take what data they could from the ashes. But as the targeting systems locked on Xenos 9, something strange happened. The planet's magnetic field spiked, not randomly, rhythmically, like a pulse. The dreadnought sensors went haywire. Navigation failed. Weapons overheated. Even their warp core stuttered. On the bridge, the Admiral barked orders. What is causing this? No one knew. What they did not see was Kale. While Claire held the ground, he had slipped into the sky, not flying high but low, riding thermal currents blending with cloud cover. His wings, thin and reflective, scattered radar. His body emitted no heat signature. To machines, he was invisible. Now he circled above the dreadnought, far higher than any bird should go. His eyes glowed brighter. From his mouth he exhaled not fire but a fine mist. charged particles drawn from the upper atmosphere. The mist drifted toward the ship, clinging to its hull. Where it touched, metal began to change. Not rust. Not melt, but grow. Tiny green filaments spread across the armor, feeding on trace minerals in the alloy. They were harmless for now, but they carried a signal. A warning. The planet was not defenseless, and it was not alone. Back on the surface, Claire stood at the edge of the root wall. Vrelk faced her from the other side, weapon raised. He saw a woman, slight, unarmed. He did not see the network beneath her feet, the thousands of roots listening, the dragon watching from above, the colony breathing as one. "Surrender," he demanded. Claire tilted her head. "You came for food, for slaves, for easy victory." She paused. "But this world does not give, it offers. And you refused the offer." She raised her hand, not in threat but in invitation. Behind her, the root wall parted, not to attack, to show. Inside the barrier, the captured Cathari soldiers sat cross-legged on soft moss. They were unharmed, fed, their armor removed, their wounds treated with herbal salves. One even smiled faintly as a young girl offered him a cup of root tea. Vrelk staggered back. "What trick is this?" "No trick," Claire said. "We do not fight to destroy. We fight to heal, even enemies." For the first time, doubt entered Vrelk's mind. Was this weakness? Or something far stronger? Then the ground shook, not from explosion. From below, a massive root, thicker than a tree trunk, rose from the earth behind Claire. It split open at the top, revealing a soft, glowing core. Inside pulsed light, warmth, and something like memory. The human stepped back in reverence. Kale landed gently beside Claire, his wings folding with a soft sigh. He lowered his head, touching his snout to the root core. It brightened. Vrelk's weapon trembled in his hand. He had faced armies, war machines, bioplagues, but never this. Never life that fought with kindness. Never strength that chose not to break. As twilight fell, the Cathari forces held their ground, but did not advance. Their commander stood frozen, torn between orders and awe. And in the quiet fields of Xenos 9, the first ember of something new began to glow. Not fire, not rage, but understanding. And it was far more dangerous than war. Long before Xenos 9 was marked on any star chart, before humans ever left their homeworld, there existed a network older than empires. It was not built of steel or data, but of life itself. Roots, fungi, ocean currents, bird migrations, the slow pulse of planetary cores. The Sylvan Weave, the old ones called it, a living memory, connecting every breathing thing across the stars. Claire had once been its guardian. She did not remember her birth name, only the title given to her by the last elders of the Ash Grove, a hidden enclave of biowalkers who tended the weave from behind the veil of myth. They were not gods, not warriors. They were gardeners of cosmic balance, and when the Great Sundering came, the war that shattered star systems and erased whole species, the Guardians were hunted, not for power, but for what they protected. The weave held knowledge, not of weapons or warships, but of healing, of growth, of harmony between predator and prey. To empires like the Cathari, such wisdom was useless. To others, it was a threat, because if life could choose peace over conquest, what need was there for armies? So the Guardians fled, scattered, slept. Claire came to Xenos 9 not by accident, but by design. This world was once a node in the weave, a quiet place where life had learned to listen. She brought with her a single seed from the heart tree of the ash grove and one egg wrapped in star moss. The seed became the silver sapling in her field. The egg became Kale. For 10 years she worked in silence. She taught the soil to remember. She showed the children songs that called rain from dry air. She let the humans believe they were just farmers, while slowly, gently, she wove them into the old pattern. They did not know they were part of something greater. They only knew their crops thrived. Their wounds healed fast and their dreams were calm. Now, with the Cathari at their gates, the truth could no longer hide. In the colony's oldest greenhouse, built over a natural spring, Claire gathered the elders. Mara was there and 2 others, Joss, a man with hands gnarled from decades of tending roots, and Lena, barely 20, but already a keeper of pollination rights. They stood around a shallow pool, its water clear as glass. Claire knelt and placed her palm on the surface. Ripples spread, but not from touch, from memory. Images bloomed beneath the water, flickers of the past. A sky burning with falling cities. Guardians turning to dust as their groves were poisoned. A great tree screaming as its roots were severed by plasma drills. And then, silence. Darkness. Until a small ship, no larger than a seed pod, drifted into the Viridian belt. The galaxy forgot us, Claire said softly. But the land did not, Joss nodded. We always knew you were more than you seemed. We just never asked. Because you trusted the ground, Claire replied. And the ground trusts you. Outside, the Cathari remained stalled. Not retreating. Not attacking. Confused by the living walls, the captured soldiers returned unharmed. The impossible resilience of the fields. Their commander, Vrelk, had not moved from the barrier line. He watched. Waited. But time was running out. High above, the dreadnought had recovered from Kale's atmospheric mist. Its weapons were online again. Its admiral, furious at the delay, ordered a final solution. A planet cracker warhead. A device that would split Xenos 9's crust, boiling the oceans and shattering the core. No life would survive. No data would remain. Just glass and silence. They would erase the mystery by erasing the world. Claire knew this. The silver sapling had trembled an hour ago, its leaves curling inward. A warning from the deep root. We cannot stop a warhead with vines, Lena said, her voice small. We do not stop it, Claire said. We awaken what lies beneath. She led them to the center of the colony where a stone well stood covered in moss. No one had drawn water from it in years. They used modern purifiers now. But this well was older. It reached down, past groundwater, past bedrock, into the planet's living marrow. Claire removed the cover. Warm air rose, carrying the scent of wet earth and ancient green. Faint light pulsed from below, soft, rhythmic like a slow heartbeat. The deep root, Mara whispered. I thought it was just a story. Stories are seeds, Claire said. And this one is ready to sprout. She turned to Kale, who lay coiled beside the well, eyes half closed. It is time for you to remember, too. Kale lifted his head. His amber eyes deepened, swirling with patterns like star clusters. He had grown since the invasion began. Not in size, but in presence. His scales now held veins of gold, and his breath left trails of shimmer in the air. He was no longer a hatchling. He was becoming what he was meant to be, a star dragon, a child of the weave born to guard worlds, not burn them. He stepped to the well's edge and exhaled. His breath did not rise. It sank, spiraling down into the darkness, carrying warmth, light, and a single note of dragon song. Deep below, something answered. The ground trembled, not violently, gently, like a sleeper turning in bed. Then roots thick as houses, glowing with inner luminescence, began to rise around the colony. Not to attack, to prepare. Claire turned to the humans. Go to your homes. Bring your families. Stand in your doorways. Do not fear. The land knows you. They obeyed without question. They trusted her as they trusted the sunrise. As night fell, the Kithari saw the change. The fields began to glow, not with fire, but with life. Flowers opened that had never bloomed before, petals shaped like shields, stems humming with low energy. Trees bent toward the sky, their branches forming arches that pulsed with green light, and from the soil new growth erupted. Armor plants that wove themselves into breastplates, vine whips that coiled like ready serpents, thorn cannons that bloomed from flower beds. The humans emerged again, but they were different. Children wore helmets of hardened bark. Elders carried staves tipped with crystal roots that sang when swung. The town medic, a woman named Dory, held a satchel of glowing moss that healed cuts with a touch. Even the youngest boy carried a seed grenade, small, round, harmless until thrown, then exploding into a tangle of binding vines. They were not soldiers. They were gardeners of war, and Claire stood at their center, Kale beside her, as the first warning shot from orbit lit the sky. The planet cracker was coming. 10 minutes until impact. Vrelk finally broke his silence. He stepped through the root wall alone, weapon holstered. He looked at Claire, then at the glowing humans, then at the dragon whose breath curled like auroras. What are you? He asked. We are what grows after the fire, she said. He shook his head. My admiral will not stop. He sees only weakness in mercy. Then let him see strength in truth, Claire replied. She raised both arms, and the ground opened. not to swallow, to rise. Massive root columns shot upward around the colony, forming a dome of living wood and light. Not a shield of metal, but of biology, layers of cellulose, mycelium, and charged plasma absorbing sap. It shimmered like a soap bubble, but strong enough to bend gravity. The Cathari warhead entered the atmosphere. It was a spear of pure destruction, trailing fire programmed to strike the colony center. But as it neared the glowing dome, the roots pulsed, the warhead slowed, not from force but from resonance. Its internal clock stuttered, its guidance system misread the target. The glowing dome did not appear as a structure. To its sensors it looked like empty space, like a hole in reality. The warhead veered and buried itself deep in the eastern ridge, harmless, disarmed by soil that sang it to sleep. Silence followed, then cheers. Quiet at first, then louder, but Claire did not celebrate. She looked up, because the real test was coming. The dreadnought had not fired again. It had gone dark. Too dark. They are preparing something worse, Joss said. Claire nodded. They do not understand life. So they will try to unmake it. She turned to Cale. You must fly now. Not to fight. To show. Cale spread his wings, wider than ever before. They caught the starlight and bent it, creating ripples in the air. With a single leap, he rose into the night sky faster than any machine. As he climbed, his body changed. Scales hardened into reflective plates. His eyes blazed like twin suns. And from his throat, not fire, but pure solar energy, drawn from the colony's orbital mirrors stored in his core. Now released, he became a living flare, a signal. To the Cathari, he was a weapon. To the Weave, he was a call, and far below in the heart of Xenos 9, the deep root pulsed once more, stronger this time because the world was waking up. The sky burned, not with fire but with light. Cale circled high above Xenos 9, his wings wide, his body a beacon. Solar energy gathered in his chest, drawn from the colony's mirror arrays orbiting just beyond the atmosphere. He did not attack. He simply held the light and let it spill outward in waves. Each pulse washed over the land like dawn breaking twice. Below, the colony changed. Armor plants sealed gaps in their living dome. Thorn cannons swiveled toward the horizon, not with hatred but readiness. Human defenders stood shoulder to shoulder, elders next to children, farmers beside medics, their skin faintly glowing where root thread bandages clung to their arms. They carried no guns, only tools turned to purpose. Pruning blades that could slice through metal, seed pouches that released choking spores, and staffs that hummed with stored sunlight. The Cathari watched from their lines, confused and uneasy. Their weapons felt heavy. Their armor itched, their comms filled with static that sounded almost like singing. Vrelk stood apart, staring at Claire. She walked the front line barefoot, her hand brushing the heads of wheat as she passed. The plants leaned into her touch, leaves curling like fingers. She was not a general, not a warlord. Yet every human looked to her, not for orders, but for calm. You could have killed my soldiers, Vrelk said, voice low. But you fed them, healed them. Why? Because war ends in one of two ways, Claire replied. With death or with change. We choose change, he frowned. Change is weakness. No, she said. Change is life. Death is what happens when you refuse to grow. Above them, Cale let out a long, low tone. A sound felt more than heard. It rolled through the air like thunder made of wind and warmth. In response, the deep root beneath the colony pulsed again. Stronger this time. The ground rose slightly. Not enough to topple, but enough to shift. Roots broke the surface in perfect lines, forming trenches that filled not with water, but with glowing nectar. Anyone who stepped in would be healed, strengthened, shielded. The humans stepped in. Their eyes brightened, their posture straightened. Even the youngest child stood tall, holding a flowering whip that coiled around her wrist like a loyal pet. Then the Cathari admiral made his choice. From orbit, the dreadnought powered up its main cannon, a gravity lance, designed to crush planets by collapsing their core. It took minutes to charge, but once fired, nothing could stop it. Not shields, not evasion. It bent space itself. Claire looked up. She knew what was coming. It is time, she said. She walked to the center of the colony, where the silver sapling now stood twice her height, its branches heavy with glowing fruit. She placed both hands on its trunk and closed her eyes. The humans formed a circle around her, hands linked, bare feet on the warm soil. They began to hum. The same low note Kyle had sung. The land answered. Vines shot upward, wrapping around homes, silos, trees, binding everything into one living structure. The hydroponic domes cracked open, releasing clouds of bioengineered pollen that shimmered gold in the starlight. The pollen did not harm. It adapted. Any human who breathed it gained clearer sight, faster reflexes, a deeper calm. Even the air tasted sweet, thick with healing compounds. Kale dove. He streaked down from the sky like a falling star, trailing light. As he neared the colony, he opened his jaws, not to bite but to release. A wave of concentrated solar flare poured out, not as heat but as pure energy. It struck the root dome and spread across its surface, turning it translucent then radiant. The dome became a lens and it focused. When the gravity lance fired, it did not strike the ground. It struck the dome, and the dome did not break. It reflected. The lance's energy bent, twisted, and shot back into space, not toward the dreadnought, but into the empty void beside it. The distortion warped local space for kilometers, tearing a temporary rift. Stars flickered. Comms went silent across the fleet. On the dreadnought's bridge, alarms blared. The admiral stumbled back. What is this power? His science officer stared at his screen, pale. It is not power, sir. It is balance. They are not blocking the weapon. They are returning it to where it belongs. Nothingness. Below, the battle began in earnest. Not with explosions, but with motion. Human defenders moved as one. A seed grenade landed near a Cathari squad, bursting not into shrapnel but into fast-growing vines that wrapped around weapons and pulled them underground. A thorn cannon fired not a projectile but a pod that burst midair into sticky spores. The spores clung to armor, sprouting tiny roots that shorted out power cells. Medics ran between lines, not carrying stretchers but singing. Their voices carried frequencies that accelerated cell regeneration. A wounded human touched a glowing leaf and stood minutes later. Even captured Cathari, once freed from their cocoons, found their injuries lessened, though they did not understand why. Vrelk watched it all. He saw a boy no older than 8 guide a vine to disarm a stunned warrior, gently, without fear. He saw an old woman offer water to a fallen enemy, her hands steady. He saw Claire walk through the chaos untouched, her presence calming even the angriest root thorn. This is not war, he muttered. No, said a voice beside him. He turned. It was one of his own soldiers, recovered from the cocoon, now standing barefoot on the soil. It feels like belonging. Vrelk raised his weapon again, but his hand shook. Then Kale landed, not with a crash, but with grace. He stood between the two lines, wings spread, eyes fixed on the Cathari ranks. His breath curled in the air, warm and clean. He did not roar. He waited. Claire stepped forward. Your admiral fears what he cannot control. But life was never meant to be controlled. Only joined. She raised her hand. The ground behind her parted. From the deep root something rose, not a weapon, not a monster. A tree, taller than any building, its bark shimmering with veins of light, its branches wide enough to shade the whole colony. It pulsed with slow, deep energy. Older than stars, wiser than war. The world tree. It had slept for millennia, waiting for the right moment. The right people. The right choice. Now it awoke. Its roots spread instantly, not breaking the ground but healing it. Cracks sealed, poisoned soil cleansed. Even the Cathari dropships began to sprout green along their hulls, not as damage but as invitation. On the dreadnought, the admiral stared at his view screen. The tree's presence disrupted every system, not through force but through harmony. His warship felt tired, as if it longed to rest. Back on the ground, Claire turned to Vrelk. You can leave. Or you can stay. But if you stay, you must learn. The land does not serve. It shares. Vrelk looked at his warriors. Some lowered their weapons. Others wept why they did not know. Something in the air, in the light, in the quiet hum of the world tree, reached into places war had locked away. He dropped his weapon. It sank into the soil and vanished, replaced by a small blue flower. The bloom of war was not blood. It was understanding. And it had just begun to open. The world tree stood at the heart of Xenos 9, its branches wide enough to shade the entire colony, its roots deep enough to touch the planet's core. It did not speak in words but in feeling, a slow, steady pulse that moved through the soil, the air, even the bones of those who stood near it. It was not a weapon, it was a question, and the Cathari fleet had to answer. Aboard the dreadnought, the admiral sat in silence. His bridge was dark, systems flickering not from damage but from change. The tree's presence had not broken his ship, it had softened it. Metal panels grew faint moss along the seams. Coolant lines bloomed with tiny white flowers. Even the war consoles hummed a quiet tune, like wind through leaves. He tried to order a retreat. His voice came out weak. His science officer turned to him. "Sir, the tree is offering something." "Offering what?" The admiral snapped. "Choice." On the surface, the standoff ended not with surrender but with stillness. Vrelk knelt before the world tree, not in defeat, but in wonder. His warriors followed. One by one, they removed their armor. The suits hissed open, and beneath them were not monsters but beings, tired, scarred, shaped by war but not born of it. Some wept as their bare feet touched the soil. Others simply stood, eyes closed, breathing air that tasted like rain after drought. Claire walked among them, offering water drawn from the old well. It was clear, cool, and carried the taste of deep earth. When a Cathari warrior drank, his eyes widened. "I feel lighter." "The water remembers peace," she said. "It is sharing that memory with you." Kale lay coiled near the tree's base, his scales dimming to a soft gold. Children, human and now cautiously Cathari young, approached him. He let them touch his snout, his wings. One small Cathari placed a hand on his side and gasped. "He is warm, like home." In the colony, humans and Cathari sat together on woven mats made of living grass. Elders shared stories. Medics treated old wounds with poultices that glowed faintly. A human girl showed a Cathari boy how to plant a seed that bloomed in minutes. He laughed, a sound no one in his clan had heard in years. Far above, the rest of the Cathari fleet hovered, uncertain. Some captains powered up their engines. They would flee, report this place as cursed, forbidden. Others shut down weapons entirely. They had seen what happened to their comrades, not conquered but changed. And the change felt like relief. The admiral made his decision. He opened a channel. Not to his fleet, but to the surface. "Claire of Xenos 9. His voice crackled, rough but quiet. "What do you want from us?" She stood beneath the world tree, Kale at her side, the silver sapling now grown into a young offshoot of the great trunk. She looked up, though she could not see the ship. "We want nothing. We offer everything. Stay and learn, or leave and remember." There was silence. Then slowly, the dreadnought's ramp lowered, not for invasion, for return. The captured Cathari who had been healed walked forward. They did not march. They walked like people coming home. Their families waited at the base of the ramp. Parents, siblings, comrades. Embraces were awkward at first, then real. The admiral stepped onto the soil himself. He did not wear armor, only a simple tunic woven from ship fabric. He looked at Claire. "We have known only war. How do we learn peace?" "You start by listening," she said. "To the wind. To the ground. To each other," he nodded, and for the first time in his life he stood still. Weeks passed. The colony did not change its name. It did not raise flags or build monuments, but everything was different. Cathari helped rebuild damaged silos, not with metal but with reinforced rootwood. Humans taught them songs that coaxed rain from dry clouds. Together they planted a new field, not for food but for memory. Each row held a seed from both worlds. The world tree grew taller. Its fruit ripened, soft, luminous pods that held not flesh but knowledge. Those who ate them did not gain power but understanding. A Cathari warrior saw his enemy not as threat but as kin. A human farmer felt the pain of distant stars. The weave was healing. Kale spent his days flying low over the fields, his presence calming storms before they formed. At night he curled around the tree's base, guarding not with teeth but with warmth. Claire rarely spoke. She did not need to. The land spoke for her. Word spread. Other ships came. Not war fleets but seekers, refugees, scientists, poets. They came to Xenos 9 not to take, but to witness. They saw a world where weapons became tools, where enemies became neighbors, where a dragon slept in sunlight and a woman walked barefoot through fields of peace. The Galactic Council, after long debate, erased Xenos 9's agri status. In its place they wrote, "Sanctuary World Alpha, protected under universal accord. No weapons, no exploitation, no entry without invitation." But Claire did not care for titles. One evening, as twin moons rose over the hills, she walked to her old field. The soil was rich, warm, alive. She knelt and pressed a new seed into the earth, small, unmarked, full of possibility. Kale lay beside her, his breath soft. "They thought we were weak," she whispered. He blinked slowly, his amber eyes catching moonlight. "But we were just waiting," she said. And in the quiet dark, the seed began to grow, not for war, not for fear, but for tomorrow. Humans had not won a battle. They had offered a garden, and the galaxy, for the first time in centuries, dared to hope.